Here's the whiteboard. I am a professor. I'm a professor of video gameology. Lesson with waifu. Okay, chat. Together, we're going to discuss what makes a video game good. We'll break it down, all right? Video games. All right? So, when we think of 10 out of 10 video games, what do we think? You obviously think 10 out of 10, right? DMC3, Doom Eternal, Counter-Strike, right? CS has got to be up there. All right, Minecraft, yep. Ignore my god-awful handwriting, right? So, but like, we're looking at video games, right? The best video games of all time, 10 out of 10 video games, right? People might disagree with DMC3, but obviously Minecraft, Counter-Strike, you know, Doom Eternal, these are definitely, they're up there. What do these games have in common, right? What's the common factor here, right? Gameplay. They have amazing gameplay, right? I gave up on all caps, all right? But gameplay, right? Fucking. Here's my sorry excuse for a controller. Video game, right? Gameplay. This is what makes these games good. This is the best games of all time, right? Right there, video game, gameplay. Who tries to lie to you, chat? Of anyone in the world, who is the person that would try to lie to you the most? That's right, journalists, right? The root of all evil, journalists. Journalists, and what did journalists say are the best games of all time? The Last of Us. What else? What did journalists say are great games? This is the only one I can think of because it's the only one that they talk about. It's The Last of Us, right? But what else do they say? They just keep saying The Last of Us over and over again, right? Like that's all they say is good. Just The Last of Us. God of War. There you go. The remakes, not the original God of War. What do these games have in common? Movies. They're movies. They don't have any gameplay. If you take it from us, the best type of game, the 10 out of 10 games all focus on gameplay. But if you talk to journalists whose job is to lie to you, they say the best games are movies. So this is obviously, there's a mismatch here between what we think makes a good game. So let's break it down a little bit further, all right? We're gonna rename our group Gamers. Gamers and journalists. So we already have examples of what makes a good game for a gamer, right? For gamers, we got Minecraft, Doom Eternal, Counter-Strike, right? Journalists, The Last of Us, God of War remakes, right? So reboots, I mean, sorry, not remakes. Common misconception. So let's break that down a little bit further. What is the essence of a good game to a gamer? Obviously, the common denominator is gameplay, right? But we could break gameplay down a little bit more. What do all of those games have in common about their gameplay? Well, they both have a lot of room for mastery. They have a lot of room for mastery, and also they have a lot of replayability, right? Minecraft, you could play it forever, right? You play the same game forever, and you get better at it. Same thing with Counter-Strike, right? It's the same game. You play the same game, you get better at it, you build mastery, and you replay it. Same thing, Doom Eternal, Devil May Cry, all those games, right? You play it over and over again. Now, what about those games like The Last of Us and God of War reboots? All right, what do you do in those games, right? You experience a story, right? You experience a story. And what do you not do? Replay the game. You don't replay the game, and you just play it for the story. So there isn't as much room for mastery, and you don't replay them. That's the journalist game. Well, obviously the gamers and the journalists just have a difference of opinion. These are both video games, and they could both be good in their own way, right? This type of video game, like a Counter-Strike or a Doom Eternal or a Minecraft, is a gamer's game. And this type is a journalist game, The Last of Us, right? Lots of story, no replayability. They're just all video games. There's room for all of us in this world, right, guys? Fuck no. You're wrong. All right, and I'm gonna show you why. All right, I'm breaking it down even further. let's take a different medium, for example. We'll see why this postmodern approach to critiquing the way games are critiqued doesn't work. All right, let's take books. All right, you got a book. B for book, obviously, right? Book. Boom, book. All right. Now, how do we review books? What makes a good book? All right, if you are looking at a review of a book, what does the review always talk about? That's right, the story, good storytelling. Does the book tell a compelling story, right? When you're reviewing a book, you're reviewing the quality of the narrative storytelling. What about, let's try a different medium. What about movies, right? Those are not boobs. Movies, all right? When you're reviewing a movie, what do you review the movie on? What is the qualifications to make the movie good? You can review a movie based on its narrative storytelling, and a lot of the times you can't, you do, but maybe not all the time. But still, it is a key factor. Story, right? Story. Acting. Yep, cinematography. You can't read that, but I can't spell it. So you know what? It's fine. Yes, editing. Boom. Have you noticed something between these two things? So, what is unique about a book is that it is the best medium for storytelling because it uses the imagination, uses your mind to fill in the gaps, right? And what is a movie good at? Well, a movie is good at showing you visual information because you've got your narrative storytelling, but you also get your acting and your cinematography and your editing and all this stuff, right? So when you're reviewing a book or a movie, it's simple. You take the thing that is unique about that medium and you review it primarily based upon that. So when you're reviewing a movie, what is unique about a movie? Well, a movie is unique because it's able to give you really good visual storytelling. So the cinematography and the acting and how well the visual storytelling goes with the overall story and how the editing flows into all that, that is how you review a movie. Let's take this thought process and expand it to its natural conclusion to video games. A book is reviewed primarily because of its storytelling abilities, and a movie is primarily reviewed based on its visual storytelling abilities. Then what is a video game reviewed based off of? Well, it would be based off of its ability to capitalize on the part of the medium that makes it unique, right? Because what makes a book unique is it has a unique ability to tell a narrative story in ways that other mediums cannot. And a movie has the ability to tell stories in a way that only movies can through the visual medium, right? So if you're reviewing a game, what is the unique selling point of a game? When you're making something as a piece of art, you have to decide, is this going to be a book? Is this going to be a movie? Is this going to be a video game? And when you decide a video game, it's for one reason, and that's because video games uniquely have gameplay. There it is. Gameplay. Video games are about gameplay. So, if we go back to our example of the journalist's perspective of what makes a game good and the gamer's perspective of what makes a game good, who is more in line with the correct way of critiquing a video game? The gamers were, because they're primarily focused on the gameplay. And the gameplay is the unique aspect of a video game that only exists in the context of a video game. So, in my opinion, if you are making a piece of art, at the start of the process of making that piece of art, you think which medium would best suit this piece of art that I am making. And if you want to make something that requires gameplay to exist, then it has to be a video game. But if it does not require gameplay, then it does not have to be a video game, and therefore does not need to be a video game. So let's use something like The Last of Us as an example. With The Last of Us, it does have some gameplay, but obviously a lot less gameplay than something like Doom Eternal, right? There's less gameplay here, but that could be okay as long as The Last of Us is using its gameplay effectively to make it a video game. But what do you do in The Last of Us during the gameplay? Well, I'll tell you, you walk around. Walking. That's what you do in The Last of Us. You just walk around. And you walk around and listen to characters talk. That's what you do. This doesn't have to be in this. You can walk around. Like, you don't have to do, like, being the person to hold up on the analog stick doesn't actually make the experience better. And for a lot of the times, this walking ceases and the game takes all of the control away from you entirely and just plays a cutscene. And what is a cutscene? A cutscene is just a movie inside the video game. So when you think about it from this perspective, if you look at the percentages, it's 20% walking and 80% cutscenes, then really what is The Last of Us? Well, if it's 80% cutscenes and 20% walking, and cutscenes are movies, then The Last of Us is primarily a movie. And so that makes sense if you go back to the journalist perspective of what makes a good video game, right? Because the journalists are reviewing games as if they're movies. So if you make a game that is primarily movies, then the journalists will think this is a good game. Whereas you look at something like Doom Eternal, where the cutscenes is maybe 5% of the experience, 5% cutscenes, and like 90 for 5%, shooting stuff, like gameplay, bang. It's hard to draw sideways, right? It's like 95% shooting stuff and 5% cutscenes. That's more of a video game, right? But this is more of a movie. And that is the perspective difference between journalists and gamers. But the problem is, it goes deeper than this. So I'm going to have to clear the board once again, and we're going to go even deeper. I hope you're taking notes, motherfuckers. So we have gamers and we have journalists, right? And they have different perspectives about what makes a game good. Because journalists prefer movies and like to review video games as if they are movies. And gamers don't really like movies as much, so they review video games as video games. So that really kind of leaves a dichotomy, but you might wonder, okay, but like, how many journalists really are there, right? Like, how many of us are real gamers and how many of us are journalists? This is where things get a little bit scary. So let's make a pie chart, right? Of everyone who has ever played a video game. Players, right? Pie chart. Look at that circle. It's perfect, right? Can you guess which color is which? Unfortunately, you're right. And gamers is in red. Gamers is red. We're like 15%, if that, of all video game players. Which means that 85% of video game players are journalists. And you can tell because journalists and gamers have distinct characteristics that are unique to each of them that don't overlap. Journalists play the game only once, if that. And they don't ever build mastery, right? They don't ever build mastery. And they only play the game one time. They're playing for a narrative experience. Gamers, on the other hand, they play to build mastery. They play to build mastery, right? And they play the game a lot of times. Now, we've already established from a critiquing perspective, gamers have the moral upper hand when it comes to critiquing video games because they're playing for the unique aspect of video games, building mastery and replayability. This is stuff that only exists in video games. On the other hand, journalists are playing video games for things that are not unique to video games, like narrative storytelling and enjoying an overall experience. Now, this would be fine because, like we said, video games are about gameplay. So even if these people decide that they want to enjoy it in a different way, that's fine. Because at the end of the day, it's still a video game. So it's still going to have room for mastery and replayability. Or so we thought. It turns out, though, there is a profit motive that makes this not a sustainable model. Let's talk about money for a second. Video games, why are they made ultimately? For the art, for sometimes, but the main reason is for money. Money. They want to make money. And how do video game developers make money? They make money by selling games, right? Surely, right? Okay, so they make a game and then they sell the game. And who is buying the game? The whole pie chart is buying the game. Video game players, right? So these are all people that buy the games. Why are the players buying the games? We have two very different demographics here, and they're both going to buy the games for very different reasons. The journalists are going to buy the game because they want to experience a narrative storytelling experience and are not going to replay the game. The other hand, the gamers want a engaging, masterful skill set to master and then replay. So if gamers are only 15% of the market, then obviously the people who make video games, if all they care about is money, then they're not going to cater to this aspect of the market because it's so small. And this part of the market will play the games anyways, even if the game market is appealing primarily to the journalists. The whole incentive structure basically goes, all right, well, you're going to play it anyways, and they'll enjoy it more if we focus less on gameplay and more on a narrative storytelling experience. Which makes sense. That's fair. That's fine. Here's the problem, though. It's a compounding issue. The more games are made for this demographic, for the journalists, the less people get to experience this part of gaming because those experiences exist in smaller quantities. So this starts shrinking and it becomes a never-ending cycle where less games are made for mastery and replayability and more games are made for journalists. And as less gamers get the experience to engage with games that are really video games, the less of them there becomes and the bigger the audience becomes for journalism type games. And it's even worse than that because not only does this happen where the market shrinks because there's small demand and then that demand gets crushed because these people will play anything anyways, because the gamers are going to replay the games, the developers don't make any money when gamers replay the games. There is even more incentive for the developer to turn this pie chart into a pie chart that is just blue. Because the blue part of the pie chart, the journalists do not replay games. And that's great for the game devs because the game devs don't have to put extra time and money into making games that are replayable or have engaging mechanics because the majority of the market doesn't care if the game is replayable or has engaging mechanics. And the more games that they make without replayability and engaging mechanics, the less people will care about those things. From the eyes of the developer, the goal is to make this pie chart entirely blue. The problem for that is, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it being video games, right? If they keep making this blue pie chart blue, then eventually this pie chart is just blue, and then video games are just movies. They become the same thing, right? And so the incentive structure for making a video game does not lean towards making games that have a high level of mastery or replayability because the finances just don't make sense. What is the solution for this? If you are someone in this demographic and want more games that are made for you, what do? Because the whole market is doing the opposite. And unfortunately, the answer to this is live service games. Now, this is unfortunate because live service games blow cock. Everyone hates this, but it is the only sustainable pay model for a game that appeals to this demographic. If you think about it this way, how do you make more money from people who are playing the same game forever? Charge them to keep playing the game. And you do that by continuously adding more content or by adding battle passes or stuff like that, which is why this part of the market is every day becomes more and more dominated by competitive FPS shooters like Counter-Strike, Apex Legends, Fortnite, stuff like that. The final frontier for people who want to build mastery and replay games is competitive FPS. Yes, because microtransactions can make that style of play a sustainable business model. That sucks for the consumer because it becomes very parasitic. The problem is capitalism? Kind of, yeah. But like, you know, you wouldn't get any video games without capitalism. So my solution to this problem has been to just play games that were released when the pie chart looked like this. At one point, the pie chart looked like this. This is like 2010. And this is the area where I stay in. I play these games. And that has been my solution. But honestly, this is not that great of a solution, unfortunately. I wish that it was like this still, but it can't be, and that's okay. Dead Space Remake, RE4 Remake, Baldur's Gate 3, Phantom Liberty, update for Cyberpunk, it's still being done. I don't agree though, because if you look at the quality of gameplay of something like RE4 Remake to OG RE4, the gameplay in OG RE4 is substantially better for replayability and mastery. That's a good example of something that you would think is inside the red category, but it's actually secretly inside the blue category. Because if you try to build mastery over the mechanics in a game like RE4 Remake, you quickly realize that they are not built to be fair or engaging. They're built to create an overall positive experience. So if you actually try to get good at 4Make, you realize you're not supposed to. You're supposed to engage in narrative experience. The same reason I really dislike DMC5, because Devil May Cry was one of these games that was firmly in here until DMC5 came out, and then it landed like about halfway through. And it still has some great mastery and stuff, but compared to previous titles in the same franchise, it is much more leaning towards this, right? The realistic aesthetic, the lack of reversals and inertia, the increased physics, all sorts of stuff like that. That is due to the overall atmosphere and market of gaming leaning more towards the journalistic aspect. And that's okay, but when people are confused, like, oh, I thought you liked those games, I do when they're made for this, not when they're made for this. What can we do about this? Nothing. We're just fucked. Like I said, there is nothing wrong with enjoying it in the other way. That's just not how I enjoy video games. So it makes me sad. Your whole argument is that most gamers don't exist. People who are gamers are putting 70 hours into a game but don't care about being a master. I beat RE4 Remake 7 times but don't care about being good at it. Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, that's not the point of video games, right? The point of video games is to get better at them and build mastery. Damn, I fucking forgot something. Hold on, I might have to go back. I thought the point was to have fun. Yeah, if you're a casual bitch, what's the point of sports? To have fun? No, the point of sports is to become better and compete. That is the point. All right, the whiteboard's coming back. All right, so it seems I forgot to rationalize / justify why I care about having skill expression in a video game. And this is the reason. Because video games are a lot like sports. They're essentially virtual sports. Because you can create a set of mechanics that the player engages with. What other things in real life has a set of mechanics that you interact with? Sports. That's it. Games, which are sports, right? Like you play tag, right? You have games. All sorts of types of games. You got a tree branch here. You got real games and you got digital games. Here you got real games like tag, right? Tag. Or fucking hide and seek, right? But what is the point of playing one of these games? From a psychological perspective, the point of playing games is to be able to create an imaginary set of rules and to cooperate with other people. It's for personal development reasons. And your brain gives you chemicals that make you feel good when you engage in these games. And so the point of these games is to win the subset of these games, to compete in them and then attempt to win within the rules of whatever a said game is, but also to do it fairly so that you can win the overall set of games. So the reason your kids play tag is because they want to build mastery over playing tag so that they can cooperate with each other and engage in this make pretend play, because that makes them a better member of society, evolutionarily. That's why games exist in real life. And that gives them dopamine. When you play a game, it gives you dopamine. It makes you feel good, right? That is the extrinsic reason for playing the game, is it makes you feel good. But the reason it makes you feel good evolutionarily is because it creates personal development. When you're playing a real game, it builds personal development. Therefore, that's why you play them. That's why it feels good to play a game, right? And so if you take a game and you make it more serious and you play at a higher level of resolution, what is that? That's a sport. That's a game that you're playing with more serious rules and is more competitive, right? It's the same thing. What is a sport but a game? It's a set of sports. I love sports. They're good utensils. Sport, right? Sports. There you go. So a sport is just a game like hide and seek or tag or whatever, but taken to a more competitive extreme, because these rules are too lax and aren't as good for competition, which is also not as good for integrating yourself into society or as a unit in yourself. So sports are more fulfilling than tag, right? When you become older, tag is not as fun. You want to play sports instead. As an adult, playing tag is fun still, but it's not as engaging as playing basketball. But most adults in their spare time are not going to play tag. They're going to play a sport. As an adult, you can turn tag into a sport. Yeah, true. But that's just like, why do you feel the need to do that as an adult? Can't you just enjoy tag? Well, it's like, because this is too low resolution, right? This isn't enjoyable at a deeper level like this is, right? So you have to turn this into this. Video games are the same thing. They're just games, right? It's a set of rules and mechanics that you engage with. What is a video game? Just a digital game. It is mechanics, rules, ways you engage, but in a digital realm, not real life. It's not physical, right? And at the lowest resolution of digital games, you have stuff like reaction games or like Connect 4 or whatever, right? Like some sort of digital interaction, like non-physical to physical game. And it just is the same thing. You find it engaging because it does the same thing that real games do. It helps to integrate you as a person, and it is good for integrating into society and blah, 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 whatever. Like building mastery over whatever set of digital things, digital mechanics in this game overall helps to become a more integrated person, which is why we find video games engaging. Video games are essentially the same thing as real games, except they're divorced from the physicality of it. And that's actually why a lot of us like it, because it's real like mastery and building all that stuff, but it's removed from the physicality. There's no physical consequences for losing. Like if you get pushed too hard when playing tag, you can get hurt, but you can't get hurt when you're playing a digital game. And for some people, this is engaging, but when you have become a higher level of integrated, then you go down to a more complex digital game. Like, I don't know what I would even call it. Like Doom, I guess, right? Like the mechanics become more sophisticated and more difficult to master, just like a sport, right? And they can become competitive too. Like you even go further beyond that and it's like esports. I don't like this side of the board. It's hard to write on this side. For me, playing a video game casually just for the experience is missing this whole aspect of playing games. If you're just playing a game for passive enjoyment and for the experience, it's like watching a movie. You don't build any of this integration by watching a movie. You have to engage at this level in order for that integration to happen, and that is what is rewarding about video games. But if you don't, like, let's say you only play a game one time and you don't intend to master the mechanics whatsoever, you are not getting the full breadth of the integration that you could be getting. You're getting a very, very small part of the integration. And then you just don't, instead of continuing to master it and going further, you just stop and move on to something else. Games are the only thing that can do this. Like physical activity, sport, esport, high-level neurological games like chess, those are the only things that can build this integration, and that's why games are interesting. Like a movie or a book could never do this, which is why video games are interesting. So if you're not playing games while using this level of integration, then personally, I feel like you are missing the point of games. And that's fine. You don't have to be engaging at this whole level, but to me, it misses the point, right? It's like reading like Dostoevsky or some high level literature and just like not thinking about it. Like you're just like, well, I engaged with that media. Like I have consumed it now, on to the next thing. If you're actually engaging with something like Dostoevsky at that level, you have to think about it. You have to engage with it, and you've got to digest it and integrate it. But they're not doing that with these games. They're just consuming it. I don't think this analogy really works because the game by itself is a complex experience. It's an isolated thing and it can be ongoing, but it's not like picking something up and finishing it before it's done. It's more like you pick up Japanese and learn it thoroughly, that's that. But then the speedrunner might want to learn all of the dialects and slang and colloquialisms and stuff. I disagree though, because I feel like if you are just going through it one time, you're not actually building any mastery. Because you can see the level of mastery that happens if you actually play it more than once. You play a game for the first time and it takes you 40 hours to beat it. And then you play it a second time and it takes you 20 hours to beat it. You have literally doubled your mastery of the game in a second attempt. There is obviously diminishing returns, but like after your 10th playthrough of trying to go faster, you're only like at 2 hours when you were at 40 before. And your next playthrough is only going to make another 5 minutes shave off, right? But you are infinitely better at the game when you're playing it 2 hours than you're playing it at 40. When you play a game for one time for just the narrative experience at like normal difficulty or whatever, you're engaging with the game so little that you don't actually have enough time to build mastery. Most games don't even test you on your mastery. Like, depending on the game, one playthrough is sufficient to build mastery. Like, I think Celeste is a good example of a game that is so hard that you have to get good at the game to beat it, because you just will not beat B-sides or C-sides, the final levels of the main campaign, by like just passively engaging with the game. You have to build mastery to play it, and that is why it is a good game. But building mastery isn't necessarily the point of gaming. I think that's different for everybody. It's like saying, what's the point of reading a book or point of watching a movie? Well, I just explained it here. It is the point of playing a game, because that is why your body physiologically likes playing games, is because it makes you a more integrated person. Like literally, like the psychology behind why we enjoy playing games is because it makes us more integrated. That's why we like playing games as kids. I honestly don't like building super complex mastery unless the game is fun to master, which most aren't. Yeah, because most games aren't built with this in mind, because most people don't play games with this in mind, which is why most games are movie games and not actual games. I feel like if you make a game without this in mind, then you are missing the point of making a game. And the only reason you're making it a game is because it makes more money to make it a game than to make it a movie. And that is the only reason why games are made that way, is because it makes more money. Why do rats play? Well, because it teaches them how to hunt. It makes them more integrated socially. It regulates their brain chemistry. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to play this way. Like, you don't have to engage with every piece of video game media in this way. But me personally, I feel like if you're creating a game that's ignoring this, or you are playing a game and actively ignoring this, then you are just not getting what you could get out of the medium. Because this is like inherently the point of the medium, right? Point is to do whatever the hell we want, however we want. People like to master games, but it's not a requirement. I mean, sure, if you don't take any of your own brain chemistry or evolution into perspective, then yeah, definitely. You just do whatever you want for whatever reason. There is no motivating factors behind any of your actions that you take. Not one, obviously. Like, you find games engaging, therefore you are drawn to playing them. There is a reason for that. You don't just do that for no reason. It's not just random. I think the whiteboard helped me illustrate my point perfectly.